Hey guys, Rick with RallySport Direct. Behind me we've got a 2000 Impreza Outback Sport with something wrong with the timing belt. I believe the tensioner has failed. I've got the Gates timing belt kit here in front of me, and we're gonna be basically doing a step-by-step how-to on how to put on a new timing belt on a single overhead cam Subaru. Now, we wanted to do it like you guys do at home, no lift, basic hand tools, because this is actually really easy. And if you have a single overhead cam Subaru, which you probably do, most naturally aspirated Imprezas, Legacies, Foresters are gonna be single overhead cam. Chances are you're approaching that 105,000 mile mark, or you've already passed it. And so we wanna be able to allow you guys to do this at home, because really it's incredibly simple. And we're also going to be doing a write-up, because we know some people prefer having step-by-step instructions with pictures as opposed to a video, so click the link below if you want that. But we've been getting a ton of inquiries on how to do this and basically be doing more write-ups, so we figured this is a perfect opportunity to do so. But let's see what's included in the kit. So first of all, you get documentation, which I highly recommend you hold on to, because you will want to reference back to this during the install, as this shows you belt routing and some other hints and tricks as well. Of course, the new tensioner, some Loctite for all the bolts that you're going to put back on, because you don't want any of those backing out. This is actually a spacer, and we're going to show this later, but this will help keep the belt from rubbing on the timing belt guide. Of course, the new timing belt, and then all of the idlers and pulleys that you'll replace on the front end of the engine, and a cool little sticker as well showing you can basically write in the date and mileage of when you replace this. Anyway, enough of the kit. Let's just go ahead and jump right into the install. First thing we need to do is remove the accessory belt cover. Next, what we want to do is remove the overflow tank. Next, what we want to be able to do is actually check the timing belt, so we'll remove the driver's side cover. And once we have access to that, we can see kind of more what's going on inside the timing belt. All right, now with the cover off, you can see this timing belt is super loose. So I'm guessing what we thought the tensioner was bad is actually correct. So with that now confirmed, now we're just going to go ahead and remove basically the front end of this motor, which involves removing the crank pulley, the accessory belts, and the rest of the timing belt cover to access everything underneath there. So this one's a little bit trickier to get to, so we'll actually use a box wrench on it. And you just want to be careful not to strip the teeth off, and this would probably be easier if we did remove the radiator, but I assume most of you guys at home won't. So we're gonna just do it this way. So now we can actually get the belts loose, and you'll just want to go in your normal counterclockwise direction. And you kind of want to overdo this one, because it's almost impossible to get this too loose, but you should see the alternator dropping down. And I'm just going to take that off there. Makes it a little bit quicker, and then you can just push it down like that. Okay. And then now that that belt's loose, you actually have a little bit more access to the AC pump. And that's going to pull that tensioner up. And it may not be a bad idea, especially if your car is really dirty, to spray some penetrating oil down on these threads, but we're just going for it. We're just going to pretend like you're doing this on the side of the road. Then you can check to see if that's loose enough, and it is, so we're good. All right, so the tricky part of this whole thing is removing the crank pulley, because it is torqued incredibly hard on there. Now, I know most of you guys at home probably have a jack handle that looks something like this. A little trick is if you have a standard wrench, you just slip it on there. And we're actually gonna put that down in there first. And it's a 22 millimeter for the crank pulley. You want to slide that pretty far down, and then what you're also going to want to have is somebody in the driver's seat with their foot on the brake and the car in 5th gear. All right, Evan, you want to go ahead and hit the brakes? Okay. And you're going to experience a lot of resistance. And we got it. Now, the bolt should come off fairly easily. So now we can just pull all of our belts off. And then the crank pulley, you'll just want to kind of give it a wobble as it comes off. And there we go. And now we have access to the entire front of the motor, but we do need to remove the AC tensioner bracket, which is pretty easy. And then we'll take off the front end of the timing belt cover. These are just two 12mm bolts. Should be pretty easy to take off. And we're just gonna remove that off to the side. So these are all gonna just be 10mm bolts, and they're really easy to remove, but they are kind of hard to find. And so if you're having a hard time getting them off, you can just kind of run your fingers in there to feel where they are, but other than that, they're very easy. And then another thing to note about this, you just want to pay attention to what bolt comes out of where. I don't think they're going to be different lengths, but you do have some that have this kind of collar on them there. All right, so with the cover off, we can inspect again. I can definitely see some play here. And then I believe one of these idlers actually lost a bearing, so it's probably good we're replacing all this stuff anyway. So in order to get this timing belt off, we'll just have to remove, I usually like to remove the tensioner first, and then we'll go ahead and remove the rest of these pulleys. And it actually looks like this cog down here that was probably causing the noise issues, but I'm glad we caught this anyway, because actually what I'm thinking happened is this thing failed. Actually, let's just take it off and then I'll show you guys real quick. All right, so with your 14mm, we're just gonna pop this tensioner bolt off, and it will be a little bit tight, so watch your knuckles. Oh! And then we'll just go ahead and remove the rest of the idlers. Now with all the pulleys off, we're just gonna remove the timing belt. All right, so originally I thought it was the tensioner in this car that was bad, but this actually once used to be a bearing sitting on the engine. So the timing belt, actually, this is a free rotating cog here. And basically all the bearings just blew out of it. And I'm guessing it was a catastrophic failure, because I heard a little bit of noise for a few minutes and then just instant metal on metal grinding. So basically the tensioner was maxed out, and because this was, now has this much slop in it, it just wasn't allowing the full tension on the belt. So the tensioner was fine, it was just this, but I'm glad that we have everything to just go ahead and replace brand new. So anyway, we're gonna get everything lined up and start getting it put back together. All right, so first thing we wanna do now that everything's off, ideally what we'd wanna do is clean up the entire engine, but because we're pretending we're doing this on the side of the road in an emergency, we're just gonna throw everything back in. So first thing we wanna do is just put the new idlers and pulleys back in. And I like to get them just finger tight at first, but you can do it however you would like. So I just like to double check to make sure that we've got everything in the right spot. And you always want to apply a bit of Loctite on the end of these. And then go through, and you just want to make sure everything's nice and snug. And then make sure they all spin freely. And now we can line up our cam gears and our main crank pulley. All right, now generally, if you're just replacing a timing belt at a normal interval, you would want to line these all up before you take off the belt, but because I wasn't sure if the timing had jumped, I didn't want to take the risk. So we're just going to do it now. And basically, and it's going to be hard to see, but there'll be a little marking on the main crank pulley, and then there's a marking on the crank angle sensor bracket, and you want to make sure those are lined up. And it doesn't have to be absolutely 100% perfect, but you do want to get it close. And for the cam gear pulley, it's a 17 millimeter. And there's a little marking on the cam gear, a little white paint. You want to make sure it lines up with the marking on the valve, or on the timing, the back of the timing belt cover. And you should be able to get it just right so it kind of hangs out in place. You don't want to go too far with it or else it'll spring back the other way. You can see those are lined up, and it's basically straight up and down for the most part. And then you want to do the same for the other side. And then use your 10 millimeter. We're just going to loosen up the timing belt guide. And then we're going to grab our new timing belt. And first of all, you want to make sure that the writing faces you so that you can read it. And we've got our main crank pulley there, our driver's side cam gear there, and our passenger side cam gear there. We're just going to double check, making sure that's the only markings on the pulley. That's correct. And so then we can slide it down into place. And what I like to do is first just make sure you get it lined up perfectly on the main crank pulley. And then the guide will actually kind of hold that in place. And then we don't have our tensioner on, and that's okay. We're going to put that on here in just a minute. Just going to want to set that right in place there. And we're going to wrap that around, up around the water pump, down around our new good cog gear. Got to do the same to the other side, up around the cam gear pulley. All right, so with everything mostly lined up, we want to put in the actual tensioner itself. Just want to make sure you hold the belt in place. All right, now you guys may not have this clamp on the side of the road, but maybe you do. But that's going to keep that locked in, and so it doesn't skip while you tighten this down. That just makes everything a little bit easier. So now we've got everything tightened down. I'm not going to say what the torque specs are. I usually torque them down to like 28, but definitely check your manual. But anyway, we're going to basically space out the belt from the belt guide. So you're going to use your supplied gate spacer, and then we can just tighten down the guide. And slide that out, and that should be the appropriate space between the belt and the guide. So now we've got everything spaced properly, everything tightened down. Double and triple check and make sure all your marks line up on your cam gear and your belt, your main pulley and your belt. You should be pretty obvious that everything's lined up with the mark, because now we pull the pin, and once you pull that pin, if you made a mistake, it's gonna basically take a vise to get that hydraulic pin pressed back in, or that hydraulic plunger pressed back in. So double, triple check. I'm gonna just double check everything, make sure everything is lined up perfectly. Looks like everything is good, everything's tight, and we pull the pin, and it'll take a moment for that hydraulic ram to push down, but that's what's going to provide the tension on this belt and prevent it from skipping teeth. And so again, just make sure you double and triple check everything before releasing that pin. All right, now we've got everything bolted up on the front, pull the pin, set the clearances. Now it's time to reinstall the timing cover, but because we have all this stuff in the way, I'm actually gonna have to do it from the bottom. So. All right, so now we've got the cover tightened up. Now I just need to put on the other side here. Just make sure it lines up in the grooves, and then it should fit on and everything will line up. Okay, so now we're going to be doing the crank pulley, and you need to make sure that you find the notch that it slides into. It's called the key. It can be a little tricky. Sometimes you kind of have to feel. Okay, we're almost directly at the bottom. Oh, there it is. You'll just feel it slip in there. You definitely want to make sure you find that, because if you tighten this down without that on there, it'll actually damage the keyway, and you'll have a really hard time fixing that. Once you get the bolt finger tight, by just seeing if you can spin it. If it's locked in there nice and good, and everything looks even around each side, you've probably got it. All right, so now the pulley's on, we can install our AC tensioner bracket. And we're just gonna get everything finger tight here at first, and then we're gonna torque it all down. So with the pulley and the tensioner installed, we're just gonna throw on the belt. I always like to make sure my belts are facing the right direction, but honestly on these ones, it doesn't really matter. It's just a personal preference. Makes it look nice and presentable. And then the power steering belt should be very easy. Okay, and then we're gonna do the crank pulley. All right, so with someone in the car, and put it in 5th gear, apply the brakes. We're just gonna wanna first get this at least somewhat snug. And again, we want to get about as far down as we can, because these will flex quite a bit. And then and torque rating on these is 94 to 95 foot-pounds. Again, check the factory manual. Some prefer to use a little bit of oil on the threads and basically torque it to a certain foot-pound, and then we'll actually do it by degrees, but don't take my word for it. Always look it up and make sure that you do it to something or a way that you are comfortable with, but I'm always comfortable with just foot-pound torque. So then we'll get a torque wrench on here, and then we're gonna go ahead and tighten these up. With the crank torque down, we're now going to put some tension on these belts. This is just a little bit of a time consumer, but it is very easy to do. You just want to make sure everything's sitting on their pulley, because if it's off of it, you'll have to loosen this back up and set it back down again. And you want these snug, but not too tight. You still want a little bit of give in them. And again, in the factory service manual, they'll tell you exactly how much play needs to be in them. But I always just do it by feel. And these basically just lock down the tension adjustment, and then it also secures the alternator to that bracket as well. And then these ones we'll actually need to do with a little ratcheting wrench down here. You don't need to get these too tight, but you want them nice and snug. So before we actually put everything else on, we're gonna test to make sure everything's fine, and that way if we made a mistake, we'll take less time to put it back on. So we're gonna try firing it up real quick. Just gonna tighten this battery up. All right, now I just put the belt cover back on. Slides right in there. So there. Just gonna hand tighten these. All right, and last but not least, our coolant overflow. These ones are always a little tricky to get in. Slide the hose back in. And you have just officially changed your timing belt. Hey guys, so we're all done with the timing belt kit, and honestly that was incredibly simple. I didn't use any gloves or anything like that because again I wanted to simulate me just doing it like in my garage or basically on the side of the road. So I'm a little bit dirty, but all in all it probably took me about 2 hours, and that was with like moving the camera around and trying to get these shots set up to make it a little bit easier for you guys to watch at home. But if you were to just do it and knock it out, especially if you have a buddy helping you out, it'd honestly probably take you an hour. So it's incredibly easy, and I expect to get an easy 90 to 105,000 miles out of this kit. Assuming nothing else goes wrong with the car. But we hope you guys found that helpful, and definitely make sure to check back for more how-tos, more write-ups. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.